Hi, I'm Erin Power.
And I'm Laura Rupsis.
We're certified health coaches, and this is Health Coach Radio.
This podcast is about the art, science, and business of health coaching.
We share our insider tips to help you become a better coach and entrepreneur.
And we interview expert guests to discover how they've made it in this growing field.
It's time for health coaches to make an impact.
It's time for Health Coach Radio.
I was pretty starstruck to have this conversation today. Our guest is Dr. John Jaquish, the outspoken inventor of the X3 bar, and by the way, also the inventor of the OsteoStrong methodology that builds bone density, helping to reverse or prevent one of the main causes of advanced physical aging, reduced bone density. Ostensibly, the other equally daunting aspect to advanced physical aging is reduced strength and muscle mass, and that's why Dr. Jaquish invented the X3 bar. Dr. Jaquish's book, Weightlifting is a Waste of Time, grabs your attention, and he knows it. The title is pure marketing hook, but also, weight training is very time-consuming. The benefits seem to come at needlessly slow increments, and the way force is applied to the joints in typical weight training is inefficient. The X3 bar uses variable resistance, very heavy-duty rubber banding, to create more intensity at the easier part of the range and lower intensity at the harder part of the range, which makes a ton of sense, and he describes it very colorfully. This conversation, though, is not a plug for the X3 bar. Dr. Jaquish barely mentions it. Instead, this conversation ends up being a rally cry for the fitness industry to get in gear and modernize its views on how we get people moving and how we get them stronger. A quick promo message, and then we'll be on our way with this episode. We've been working on something pretty cool behind the scenes that I'm excited to tell you about. My Primal Coach is a convenient app-based health coaching program that delivers daily lessons with actionable tips for losing weight, gaining strength and energy, sleeping better, managing stress, and more. It provides personal one-on-one coaching to help you stay on track and reach your wellness goals in just 12 weeks. My Primal Coach is developed and delivered by the team behind Primal Health Coach Institute, the first and preeminent ancestral health coaching school in existence. Primal Health Coach Institute has trained and certified thousands of successful health coaches across 75 countries around the world. We're experts in behavior change, and we understand how to get clients the results they desire. Our mission at My Primal Coach is the same as our mission with Primal Health Coach Institute, to help 100 million people reclaim health and wellness through education and coaching. It's pretty exciting and very cool. Please check it out for yourself at myprimalcoach.com. We love to see who's listening out there, so take a screen grab of your podcast player and tag us on Instagram at Health Coach Radio. And by the way, the show notes for this episode can be found at primalhealthcoach.com/radio. The only thing I can think of to say to prepare you for this conversation is buckle up. Here comes Dr. John Jaquish.
Dr. Jaquish, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Oh my gosh, we were already laughing our asses off before we ever even hit record. So this is going to be such a fun conversation. So Erin and I have a little bit of your background, but if you wouldn't mind for our audience, give us the 5-minute backstory on Dr. Jaquish, please.
Sure. I got started in life sciences about 13 years ago when my mother was diagnosed with osteoporosis, and I wanted to research it. And as I read about it, I just had a very different take and different feeling on it as others. Now, I did not have my PhD at this time. So my approach was like, okay, let's rebuild my mother's bone the same way we build bones as kids, like with force through bone. Now, kids go through high impact, which you're not supposed to do with older people for obvious reasons. They can get hurt pretty bad. So the decision I made was I was going to emulate high impact forces by isolating the positions that people would normally absorb impact and then allow for self-loading in those positions. And that worked very well. It's now called OsteoStrong. You can find it in 9 different countries, 160 different locations. They're all independent clinics. It's like a franchise model for clinics. So I believe we just opened one in India and but Australia, Iceland, Norway, Denmark, Italy, Spain, US, of course. There's like 140 in the US.
Wow.
So it's doing fantastic, and it reversed my mother's osteoporosis. And all it does is just emulate impact. And it was very interesting because being in the medical device industry, I thought selling to physicians, because you have to get the physicians to tell them to go to the clinic, right? You want them to refer, because people don't very few people take it upon themselves to just check out what's out there and not get their physician's advice to treat, something, to look into something that's like a medical problem. So you really have to depend on the physician's referrals. So I go and talk to these physicians, and they told me, like, well, in theory, this sounds great, because I was talking about theory in the beginning. And they're like, but you have to have evidence. You gotta show in a clinical trial. Okay. So got a couple studies put together, and they were very enthusiastic. Once I showed them the evidence, they were on board. And that was it. And that just continued and continued. And of course, there's more research coming out all the time. There was just a paper that was published in world's top aerospace journal about the potential of using this for astronauts. Really positive. So I'm super happy about that. And that's moving in a great direction. But while I was doing the research, and the original trial was done at the University of East London, and then it was conducted at a study at a surgery center nearby, a hospital that the students and professors from the University of East London could come to pretty easily and conduct the trial. And so a lot of the test subjects ended up being physicians, because they met the inclusion criteria. And so what they would say to me while this was running is, gosh, we're using really high loads. Like, how is this possible? Like these women who had never, so it's just a postmenopausal population. These women had never exercised. That was part of the inclusion criteria, because we didn't want like somebody to be like, oh, well, somebody exercised before, so that's probably why they reverse their osteoporosis so easily. No. I wanted something that was more like the regular population, because average population, especially females, no strength type exercise. If they had done cardio before, that's fine, but no like loading of any kind. And so they were pushing 6, 7, 8 times their body weight with their lower extremities. Now they're pushing it about that far, about an inch. And that inch comes from the compression of the bone and the joints. So this machine doesn't move, you move. And so while they were doing this, there's like, we're dealing with just incredible forces. Like, how is this possible? And I said, well, the body's optimized to handle those incredible forces. And they said, how does this compare with people that lift? So I found a paper that was done by a group that's with the American College of Sports Medicine. And they were looking at the NAIMS database, which is the largest health database maintained by the National Institute of Health. And so what they determined was that beginners typically use 1.3 times their body weight with their lower extremities, loading the lower extremities. Advanced athletes, 1.53. Now, keep in mind, like a lot of people imagine that they like leg press, like, 1,000 pounds or whatever. But keep in mind, when you like push a car, your car weighs 4,000 pounds. That doesn't mean you bench press 4,000 pounds.
Right.
The car's rolling. So most of the weight
on
is
wheels.
down. Right. Same thing with a leg press. You're only pushing up at like, 30-degree angle. So most of that 1,000 pounds, like 700 of that 1,000 pounds is going right into the ground. And it's rolling on rollers. So just because you can, like, if you can push a car uphill, like just a little bit, doesn't mean you can bench press 4,000 pounds. So that's, like, because people hear that 1.53 number, and they're like, well, I can do way more than that. I'm like, no, you really can't. So the minimum dose response for bone growth is 4 multiples of body weight, 4.2 actually. Okay. So what people use in the gym and what people need to trigger bone growth, there's a huge difference. And so it's like, no wonder Impact was so successful, because people, when absorbing impact, gymnasts, when they absorb impact, can get 10 times their body weight. Now they're trained for that. And that's also very dangerous. They retire at an average age of 19 years old for a reason.
Yeah.
So, okay. So what we were getting was the benefit of high impact without the risks of high impact. But when I'm looking at this model, like how much load difference there is between what someone can handle in the weaker range of motion versus a stronger range of motion, there was a 7-fold difference on average. So if you know you can hold 7 times more here at the extended position of an exercise than you can here, why would you ever lift a weight? It doesn't make sense. So that was like the first day I was like, maybe weightlifting is a waste of time. Let me go into this. And so that, that became the title of my book, Weightlifting is a Waste of Time. And then so I did research on variable resistance, on just general loading and output, force curves, a lot of conflicting research on some of these different kind of subtopics, only because they're not looking at it from the perspective that I was looking at it, as in there's like something flawed with just picking up a static weight. Like, because that's what we've been doing forever. Just basically weightlifting is no different than picking up heavy rocks.
Right.
There's better handles, I guess. So that's
More
really
equally weighted.
Say it again.
More equally weighted and not necessarily conducive to real life, if you really think about it.
True. But also like lifting full range. If you had a heavy piano to pick up, you would try and optimize your range of motion so you're only using the strong range.
Mm-hmm.
When you run, you only use 7 degrees of action behind your knee, even though you have 180 degrees available.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why wouldn't you use a whole 180 if full range is so important? Why? Well, because that wouldn't be running. That would be like knee touching on the ground. You'd go very slow. I mean,
that would look weird as well.
It was stupid. It'd be stupid movement. Right. But I mean, like, because it's sort of like we're very excited about full range, which has merits for sure in exercise science. But we're very excited about full range. So it's sort of like when we come up with a rule, it must be applied everywhere, which is not really the case. So what I came to the conclusion was like, we really need a weight that changes as we move. So we need a lower weight where our joints are exposed to injury in the weaker range. In the middle, we want kind of a mid weight. And then when we're close to lockout, when we're at the more extended, more contracted position, we want a hyperload, something to be way heavier than we could deal with in gym.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so when I do a chest press, I hold 550 pounds at 120 degree angle of inclusion of my elbow. So right here for those watching. So this is 120 degree angle right here.
Right.
And the back of the hand is in line with the clavicle. So this is exactly how I would absorb force if I were to hit the ground.
Yeah.
So it's an impact ready position. So I use 550 in that position and I keep doing repetitions with 550 until I can't get there anymore. Then I start shortening up the range. So I just go as far as I can. So then all of a sudden I'm training with 300-pound repetitions because half of the stretch of the band that I'm using gives me 300 pounds. So these are very heavy bands. These aren't like bands like, when you get like an exercise band, and you just get like a bag of bands at like Walmart. Right. Yeah, those things are very lightweight because if a band is heavy enough for strength, see, and this is the reason why bands are used in rehab. A band that's heavy enough for strength is heavy enough to twist your wrists and potentially break them, which is why band training never took off. Because the band itself always wants to be a circle. Your body interfaces with flat surfaces really well, like the ground, like bars. Notice they're straight, or at least where you grab them is. So I needed an interface between heavy banding and myself. So I developed an Olympic bar. There was one here a minute ago. I just walked off of it. Like literally, it was right here. So this bar, so like an Olympic bar has swivel inside of it, and then another plate that you stand on a second ground which protects the ankles and the wrists from any twisting, because those are your interface points. And so with that, then we do regular Olympic movements, or just kind of both like Olympic lifting, powerlifting type movements. So we do like a chest press, squat, deadlift, row, and do it with the variable resistance. So you go to a deeper level of fatigue because you're training with more weight in the position where you're using more muscle, and less weight when you're using less muscle. So deeper level of exhaustion. Now, keep in mind, this is after a whole set, because a lot of the critics of variable resistance would say, or do say, that the problem is when you try and match the weight to your own biomechanic strength curve, it's not difficult enough. Like, as in you're not starting to fatigue in the weaker range, sort of at the sticking point, and I'm like, right, that's the point, because that sticking point keeps you from doing anything, from growing,
from getting stronger, right?
Right, because you fatigue your connective tissue instead of the muscle. Like when you see young guys who have stronger muscle than tendons and ligaments, so like teenage boys, you see them grow muscle real quickly because they've got the tendons and ligaments, they just don't have the muscle yet. So you see guys, they start lifting, they put on like 10 or 15 pounds of muscle, and they're like, awesome, keep this up. In 6 months, I will be like Dwayne Johnson.
Right.
And then guess what? Like nothing happens after that. They put on those 15 pounds and then never again. And then they keep on repeating the same program with maybe some added in extra crap that they read about in some terribly written article. And then like, they still don't go anywhere. And then, they train. And then the reason is because you get strong enough to where when you're in your weaker range, you're just damaging your joints. So the pain associated with lifting goes higher and higher and higher, but there's no growth.
Right.
Because the tendons and ligaments, and what causes a tendon or a ligament to grow has to do with compressive forces that are much higher than what we get in weightlifting, much more like OsteoStrong, or much more like what we do at the top of these movements with my device, with X3. So like when I'm holding that 550 pounds out here, that's putting compressive force through my elbow, my wrist, my shoulder, and I'm building the tendinous and ligamentous tissue. There's an upregulation of fibrocartilage. This is seen in a 1999 study by Benjamin and Ralphs that looks at like, how do we actually increase the performance of tendons and ligaments? And so they determined that it is putting force through the tendons and ligaments, but not in the way we lift weights. But that is the way that we do loading with my newer device. So basically the whole like research project after doing the clinical trial on OsteoStrong was building another device. Like I said, the bar and the plate that's now called X3. And the premise of that was like it grows muscle 3 times faster, which was seen in the study. But a lot of people just didn't really understand or didn't want to read that study. So I kind of went away from that, though the name is still X3. We pretty much just talk about how you train with greater force. That gives you greater fatigue, thereby greater growth.
Well, there's more and more research, and more people have got on the bandwagon that the way to actually improve lies in the intensity of the work, not in the volume or the frequency. And so this is becoming much more widely stated. I don't know if it's widely practiced as it should be.
I don't think it is.
I don't think it is either.
Well, because most people, it's like, it's got to be more intense. And they go, oh, okay, but how do you do that with a static weight?
Right.
You can't. Like, you still have the same limitations. Like, I guess you could try harder, but it's not like most people that were lifting weights were not trying.
Right. Yeah. Can you like, just as a, old fashioned gym rat, I'm having a hard time kind of visualizing how this works. Would you mind kind of relaying an example of I don't know, we could pick
the bench press is the bench press is the easy one, because you were kind of demonstrating, but I think for people listening, it's like, take us through which range is the weaker. So, okay, you kind of expressed that.
Like explain the movement,
yeah.
weak versus the strong. And then how does your device or your program aim to improve on that?
Right.
Or get better results?
So the problem, so when I'm in a weaker range of motion, you can still hear me, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So when I'm in a weaker range of motion, that's back here.
Okay.
Like the
on the bench press.
So when the weight is down across your chest.
Right.
It's lowered to your chest.
So this is where the shoulders are the greatest risk of injury.
Right.
And this is why people who've been like heavy bench pressers in their 20s, in their 30s, it hurts them to put a dress shirt on. And then in their 50s, it like brings tears to their eyes if they have to just like rub their ear or something like that. Because they can't lift their shoulder anymore because of the chronic damage. So and it's a shame because I know so many people who use X3 so they can be better at powerlifting. And I'm like, yeah, you want to power lift less. You want to use X3 more. So you're focused on growing your body, developing, however they choose to use it. I tell everybody to use it the same standard program. Powerlifters always want to do their own thing. I love NFL players. They do exactly what instructed. They're awesome. I'm working with 19 of them.
Cool.
So at the bottom of the movement, you're the weakest, and then you're a little bit like, let's say you can hold X here, let's say maybe 1.5X or 2X here, and then 7X here.
At full range.
It's a steep
top of the movement
up. So let's say I'm doing repetitions. I'm doing slow and controlled repetitions, like this kind of cadence. Yeah. And then let's say I do 20 and then I can't get to the top anymore. So then I come down and I'm going like maybe 3/4. So now I'm using, 400 pounds, and then I go half. Now I'm using 300 pounds. Yeah. And then the last repetition may only be like this.
Like an inch or two.
Be a 100-pound repetition, but I fatigue the entire muscle, all ranges of motion. Yeah. At the same time.
Okay. And so people who haven't seen the X3 bar, and people who are watching this, on video on YouTube will have seen you demonstrate this. But also picture that there's a band wrapped around your back. It's wrapped around your back, and you're holding the bar. So I just want people to visualize that this is against elastic resistance, and maybe that wasn't totally clear.
Yeah. It's layered latex.
Layered latex, great. Yeah. So we understand how bands work. When the band is stretched more, it's heavier. When the band is stretched less, it's less heavier. So you start with it as much as you can, stretch it, and then as you fatigue out of that far range, you pull it back. Fatigue out there, fatigue out. You just go until you're done, basically.
Well, all repetitions are full range.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So as you begin to fatigue, you just can't complete the whole range because you fatigue the heaviest, most powerful part of the muscle.
Gotcha.
And so you go to fatigue in all ranges of motion. And of course, there's only one set per movement.
I love that.
You never do more than one set because you go to such incredible fatigue. To your point, intensity is better than volume. Yeah. So, and it's funny, if somebody does one set right, they cannot do another set. Like I get a lot of messages. Wow. Like I was planning on doing like 3 sets per exercise, no matter what you're saying is your recommendation. But now I realize why you say 1. It's because
it's crazy.
A lot of people are close to losing consciousness.
I've tried a buddy of mine. My buddy of mine was selling one, and he had bought 2, and I went to he has this little bakery shop. I went to go check it out. And he said, here, try a set of squats with this thing. And I died. I literally died.
You did not die. You're here. You felt like you died.
But here's the thing. One thing that you mentioned a second ago when you're describing how this works is you described that our tendons and ligaments tend to be the thing that holds us back as we get, maybe as we get older, or these
as you get stronger.
Right. Okay.
Like the stronger you are, the more limiting joints become.
Yeah.
Because they're the bottom.
I felt that. Yeah, I felt that.
You need something. Yeah. So the way X3 works, you're hyper loading the extended portion of the movement, thereby you're actually stimulating the growth of tendons and ligaments too, which is something weightlifting does not do.
Yeah. I felt like subconsciously that my tendons and ligaments were the things that were holding me back or something. Am I experiencing that correctly, or what do
You're
you
explaining it correctly. Yeah. And
Mhm.
that's basically the feeling of everybody when they think they like get to their genetic potential, or they
Right.
think like, oh, I just can't get any stronger than this. This is kind of my,
Yeah,
my ceiling. It's just like, no, your strategy of loading the body needs to change.
exactly. I can
So,
say that
now what I said when we were talking before the show started, the
Mhm.
biggest difference, like I generally here, let's talk about the failure of the fitness industry.
Please.
So fitness is the most failed human endeavor of all.
Ooh,
Like, people have not failed at anything like this.
A bold statement, given how much
Yeah,
failure we've seen in health and wellness
sure. I
generally.
mean,
love this.
health is a disaster, and people are figuring out like a lot of medicine is just kind of like scratching your head and going, well, this is the best we can come up with the information we have to date. And I think a lot of people, have this, like, they watch too much Star Trek or something like that, where like, the doctor just like waves some sort of like, blinking light wand in front of your eyes, and you're like, oh, I don't have cancer anymore. And they think that's like where this is going. And it's just like, there's a lot we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. We haven't even identified all the growth factors in muscular tissue.
Mhm.
Like, they're discovering other things, other chemicals that show up that are like, oh yeah, that actually has to do with growth. We didn't think it did. Lactic acid has to do with growth. So remember when everybody's trying to flush all their lactic acid out?
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. So, but it's fine, because like, we're all learning. The problem is the fitness industry doesn't learn really anything. It's like, while sports science knows a lot of things, like for the last 40 years, most sports scientists will say cardio is a really bad approach to losing body fat. Yet every gym you go to, they'll be like, oh, if you want to lose body fat, cardio.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, and yeah, I cover that in the book. Like 40 years of research, just ignored. And it's a shame. And then, we have, like, nutrition is an even bigger research
Cluster.
But so my point when I talk about the fitness industry, I'm saying that, like, it's such a failed endeavor. Like, who's really in shape? Who really sees a huge difference? And I say to most people, I bet you can think of 10 people right now who go to a gym, 2-3 times a week. They're all about their fitness. If they do CrossFit, they never shut up about CrossFit. And I always tell them, the reason you tell me about your CrossFit is because nobody could ever tell that you exercise by looking at you. That's what you tell me. So, yeah, I got a lot of tough love.
I have an anecdote that might make your head spin. So buckle up.
All right.
Okay. I'm a group fitness instructor. I'm sorry. I am.
Yeah, that's great.
I did the math one time that in my 28 years, 7 years of teaching group fitness, I've probably taught to 90,000 people.
Okay.
And
yeah, a lot of people.
I don't think 1% of them got fitter. I don't think 0.01%.
That's where I'm going. Yep.
And I actually walked into the gym one day to teach my class, and all my participants were lined up outside the studio waiting to get in, waiting for me. And I looked at them and I thought to myself, not in a disparaging way, like, these 30 people have been showing up to my class every Monday night for 10 years, and not one of them
is any different.
Is getting stronger. Their body composition is not changing. What are we doing? Like,
we have the wrong approach. Yeah. And so, like, my observations about variable resistance, like, all of the research on variable resistance shows the same thing, that people gain strength and muscular size faster with variable resistance than they do with standard training. However, why is it? And I think this is really the question. So, like first, I mean, I don't like making blanket statements, but I'll make one. 99% or maybe 99.9% of people who engage in fitness get nothing out of it. Like, or they might grow like in the very beginning, like when they're teenagers, and that's the only time that happens. Most, people who like think they're fit are just skinny fat, which means very low muscle, and they actually still have a significant amount of body fat. And so, these are like the girls in their mid 20s that are, they wear a size 0, but they still have cellulite on the back of their legs, and they're like all upset about it. And it's like, yeah, because that's just fat back there. Like, you didn't develop your hamstrings, you didn't develop your glutes. Yeah, like it's not going to look good. Like, and it's an underdeveloped body. So, even the top leanest 1% of men in the United States is 10.6%. That's like, maybe you can see like the top 2 abdominals, and then you got a little bit of a gut, hanging over your belt. Yeah. Like, that's the best 1%. And 50% of American males engage in strength exercise, by the way. So most of them are at home.
Right.
And for whatever they're doing. And then, the rest of them go to a gym. So if the top 1% is still like really not that impressive, like who is fit? Yeah. And the answer is almost nobody. And the reason is there are outliers. So there are genetic outliers. And when you understand the genetic outliers, everything I'm saying is going to make a whole lot more sense. So the genetic outliers, their genetics actually don't put them like a lot of people think that like some people are born with like 10 times the natural amount of testosterone. And which I think there's also, I think we live in a world where everybody wants to just take some sort of medication and then they'll get exactly what they want. Like a vaccine, maybe. So hey, the jokes are free. So they think they're going to get everything they want. So like, I have people coming up to me, and like, if someone sees me at like an airport, because I don't think they want to put this in writing, but I get it in writing all the time anyway. Hey, how do I get on testosterone replacement therapy? And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like, you clearly don't know what that means, because it replaces what's supposed to be there. So if you don't have a natural level of testosterone, they give you a natural level of testosterone. So it's not an advantage at all. Right. Like 0%. And this is well written about. Like WebMD is like, its replacement is not the same as using anabolic chemicals at all. So what, they're talking about like dosages and stuff like that. So like, and like a lot of the troll comments are, like they're pointing at me or whoever, like a 14-year-old with a visible bicep vein is, people say, oh, he's on steroids, because they're jealous, because they just want to point. And, it's sort of like any pretty girl. It's like, oh, look at all the plastic surgery. It's like, shut up. She's 19, right? Like whatever. So this happens. And so people say, well, there's a lot of TRT going on there. And it's like, you clearly don't know what TRT means, because the R is for replacement. Right. And you can't have a lot of replacement. Right. Replacement is replacement. It's 600 to 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. That's replacement. You can't have a lot of that.
Right. Well, your assertion that I want to read it verbatim because it was the funniest thing. Fitness is the most failed human endeavor of all. I just would love to get your definition of, what do you define as fitness? Like, what would be if you had to define it, what is it? Question for you.
So I'm going to define this in a more of a cultural way than a scientific way. Okay. Because ultimately, people will say they exercise to be healthier, but that's bullshit. They exercise to be more attractive, right? I mean, we rope people in, and I'm talking to 3 of us, I'm talking about your listeners. We rope people in to doing fitness because they know they're going to be better looking. Now, the health benefits that come along with it, yeah, people are happy about that. But that's not why they do it. Like people, if somebody's thin, and they think that that's healthy, and you want to talk to them about nutrition or something like that, like they're like, right, I'm not interested. Like I'm doing great with what I'm doing, and they might be eating nothing but candy bars or something like that, an extreme deficit. And you're like, okay,
Yeah.
well, you can still be diabetic and thin.
It's a very hard pill to swallow. I was just thinking that do you ever hear people who say, well, no, the gym's my happy place? And it's like, sure. And
I hear that. I tell them take X3 to the gym, and it'll be an even happier place, because instead of being the same overweight, weak person you have always been going to the gym, you'll actually be strong and lean.
yeah.
And they're like, yeah, you're a dick, but okay.
Well, okay, so
I mean, this is how I talk to people.
no, but I
got them the brutal truth.
there's a lot about what most of what you said I completely agree with, but there's some things I push back on a little bit just from my own experience. We talked before we started recording. I owned a gym. I still legally own it. I moved, got the heck out of Illinois, moved to Florida. Freedom. But anyway,
right. I made the mistake of living in Illinois.
There you go. So I moved down here.
In Lincoln Park. It was.
I still legally own my gym, but I'm not training there anymore. But I have a little home gym here, and I literally just enjoy the act of moving my body and challenging myself. So
Sure.
my workouts change all the time, but I predominantly strength training. But anyway, from being at the gym, and when we talk about, what people do you actually see getting fitter from a coaching perspective, over the last 10 years, people that stuck with it and followed my advice, which was not to be here 5 days a week. I think that's too much. You're overtraining. But at the end of the day, they did get stronger. They noticed differences in their own capabilities. People telling me in real world, holy cow, we had a blizzard and I had to shovel a foot of snow. And you know what? I did it and I wasn't sore for 3 days.
Right. It was
like
way
my body.
Yeah,
my body was stronger because I'd been working towards this. But to your point, there's a large number of people. Don't get me wrong. There are plenty of people that came in, including myself, that will say that changing the way I trained changed my body composition, like how I exercised. I was a cardio bunny for a long time.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, I lost weight, but I didn't have the muscle mass. When I stopped doing all the cardio.
Cardio makes you lose muscle, not body fat.
Absolutely. I was burning calories, burning muscle. I wasn't building it. But at the same time, from the standpoint of CrossFit, I think of what I loved about it was the community that it built, the ability, like the mindset of CrossFit of, even there's a sense of competition. It's really about you just getting better. And I think there's some benefit in that. And as the coach, I did notice benefits and changes in my clients, but not all of them. And typically the ones that didn't see the benefits were the ones that were expecting magic to happen just because they went to the gym and lifted something. Yeah. They weren't changing how they ate. They weren't recovering properly.
And I don't have a six pack yet.
Yes. Like they just, like I kept trying to tell them, oh my God, I only have you for an hour, 3 days a week. What are you doing for the other 23 hours of the days you're here and the other 24 hours of the day that you're not? So this is where I think the disconnect is coming with the fitness industry, is we're not tying this together. I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
Well, nutrition, there's a lot of bad information in nutrition also, which I cover heavily in the book. I also I seem to have a controversial approach when you read my words. I don't actually. I'm still cool with carbohydrates, but there's a limit to how much carbohydrate you can take in to replenish the glycogen within your muscle. Right. Beyond that, it's just going right on your fat ass. And so you got to keep that in mind. There's a limit. And, and so also carbohydrates play zero role in muscle protein synthesis.
Oh, insulin's not anabolic?
Right.
Aaron says with a sheepish grin.
you know where that myth came from? Yeah. It was people taking exogenous insulin, at 40 to 50 times what your body could create. So there's a study in I want to say the late 80s, or maybe it was, I want to say 91, where they took exogenous insulin injections and combined it with growth hormone. And this is where the bodybuilders got their protocol, how they do this. And it was highly anabolic.
Oh.
Ridiculously anabolic, but you can never do this with your own biochemistry.
No.
So that's where that whole, you need massive amounts. And of course, when they inject all this insulin, these Now, this is me quoting bodybuilders, not me quoting the scientific study, because I don't know exactly what they did in the scientific study. But like, I know a bodybuilder who injects a bunch of insulin and then he has 900 grams of carbohydrates within the next 8 hours. And I'm
Oh
like,
my gosh.
how do you do that? And he goes, I just get a box of Snickers bars and eat the whole thing.
Oh, great.
Oh,
And I'm like, wow,
for
like
the love of God.
you are going to have so many health problems later in life. I don't even know what they're going to be, because like, this is uncharted territory. It's not like there's a study on people who do this.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I mean, that's a small segue. And I was just like,
Yeah, I mean, like you talked about genetic outliers before, but I think about, bodybuilders outliers don't really, they're going to do what they're going to do. Even powerlifters, like when we're talking about gen pop, just humans trying to get fitter, better, healthier.
yeah.
That's why when I was listening to I was telling you before we pressed record that I came across you through Ben Greenfield's podcast, because it was titled "Lifting Weights is a Waste of Time," and I was like, it feels like it's a waste of time. Actually, now that I hear it in my ears,
A lot of people agree. Like, they actually, like, when they saw this title, they were like, I had to read that book because I trained for years and didn't get shit out of it.
Exactly. I can tell you the point of diminishing returns. I think I hit it probably 20 years ago. Like, I still go and lift. My weights haven't really increased. I certainly haven't put on any additional muscle mass. It's like it stopped working 20 years ago. The way I'm doing it now. Why? There's nothing else in my life that I would keep doing if it stopped working 20 years ago.
That's right.
Like, it's so
right. Like, you wouldn't stay in a marriage that was dysfunctional for 20 years.
Correct. Or a job, anything, right?
Right. Like, why would you keep lifting? And the reason people keep lifting is they're like, well, I know I'm supposed to lift.
Yeah.
Literally. So that's right.
I don't use it, I'll lose it.
Right. Like, I don't want to lose what I gained, but I'm really not gaining anything else. So it's just kind of just banging my head against the wall here. And so, but let me let everybody in on the big difference between the people who respond to weights and the people, and the 99.9% of people who really don't. Now, keep in mind, there's some confusion in there, because there are some people who are just really lean and they never really build any muscle. And those are people with just responsible nutrition, because there is no like gene for being like totally lean. Like, a lot of overweight people imagine there is, but there isn't. And also, on the other side, I don't believe that the reason for obesity is purely gluttony, as some of the sports science people would say. There's different hormonal impacts to different things, insulin being one of them. There's a great study that came out 2 days ago about the carbohydrate. It's called carbohydrate insulin model. CIM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just 2 days ago. Oh, that's good.
Yeah. It's, my last Instagram post, it has the citation.
Link. Cool.
Yeah. Just go to my Instagram and it's right there. The biggest issue with the differences, and this is why standard fitness gets defended, because somebody looks at an outlier and says, well, if I keep training, I'm going to be just like that guy. So I'm going to do exactly what that guy does. But the problem is they don't have the genetics of that guy.
Right.
And so you can do what that guy does. And God knows if what he does is really what he does. Like, he might just be lying, like when Dwayne Johnson says he eats 10,000 calories a day. No, he doesn't. Nobody eats that. That's ridiculous. Maybe he did it once. But like he says, like when I'm trying to put on muscle, like he has like a stack of pancakes, like a foot tall, like that's just stupid. Like he would be as fat as a couch.
Yeah.
He would look like a couch if he ate like that. Like, that is so just ludicrous. And he probably didn't even write that. It was probably from his like PR agency. I'm guessing he read that and he's like, I eat what? Like, okay. The difference is, and it's not hormonal. So basically I think there's been 3 people in modern history that have had such an abnormal level of testosterone that they were disallowed from sports. 2 of them were this past Olympics, and 1 of them was in the 90s. And I write about the one in the 90s in my book because I wrote the book before the Olympics. So before that, it had only been one person who was an outlier. So everybody else just kind of has a normal level of testosterone or depressed level. Like some people, some athletes have a depressed level and they still win. The real difference has to do with where the tendons attach. So I'm going to use my pectoral as an example. If you're watching this on video, you can see it, but I'll try and describe it. So my pectoral is attached to my sternum. That's the origin. Here's the pectoral muscle, my chest. And then it's attached in here, like right under the beginning of the bicep. I'm kind of going in between my two bicep heads. So it's it's right on the humerus bone underneath the bicep is where 99% of the population has that attachment point. So it attaches here and pulls the 2 points together, right? So if I'm pressing, it's pulling those points together. If I'm moving my arm like in sort of a fly type motion, some people have a mutation so that their insertion point is under the bicep at the other end of the bone.
Is there a way you can tell by visually looking at it?
No, you'd need to do like a CT scan.
Okay.
To understand. Like this is why this was kind of elusive, also kind of pointless to study because there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
Like if you have a disadvantageous tendon layout, it's not like training is going to fix that. So it was kind of ignored, but it's been written about, and they can do different animal models. So basically, when you have that insertion point out here, you have a longer lever on the muscle. So what do we know about longer levers? Well, longer levers can displace power massively.
Yeah.
Also keep in mind that tendons are elastic. They are like rubber bands themselves. And the longer it is, the more tendon you have, the more elastic it is. So when people who were born to be athletes train, they're doing variable resistance inside their body and they don't even know it.
Right.
Like, so when somebody has a problem with variable resistance, it's like, but this is how the strongest people in the world are genetically built.
Yeah.
So how could you deny that?
Yeah.
They're denying it. They're usually just, like it's the people who are selling a program that's, based on standard weightlifting that hate me the most, that are trying to discredit me because obviously like I'm proving them wrong and okay, so you're wrong. Like, don't cry about it. Come up with a better program. So anyway, but that's that's really the difference. And so now when we look at variable resistance, that the whole concept of people being genetically different is out the window because now everybody can load where they're strongest and deload where they're weakest. So they can go in all positions to fatigue the entire muscle and it stimulate far more growth. So now everybody can grow like an NFL player. Everybody.
Yeah. This makes me think of, this has been shared widely and I'd love to know what you think of it, but this idea of like how the femur inserts into the hip socket and the orientation of one's pelvis and how that affects squat depth. Do you know what I mean? Like that, I'm not sure if I'm articulating it well, but, and the way, I guess, ligaments and tendons are oriented around the joint. Is there something to that as well? So like I've got long femurs, I'm leggy, so I can't get ass to grass. I've tried, I can't do it. So does variable resistance work with like skeletal anatomy too in that regard?
Yes. I mean, it's going to make up for a lot of biomechanical inefficiencies. But I mean, it works like that, like a flamethrower works for killing ants, just make sure the ants aren't like on your grand piano. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about this from the point of view of the people listening here. So we're going to have a subset of coaches that have a fitness aspect to their practice that I would love to drill down on. But then also at some point in this conversation, those health coaches listening that aren't really fitness people, how can they learn some of what we're talking about? Because all health coaches should be addressing movement to some capacity in their coaching practice. And what can they take away from this conversation? But starting with fitness professionals who might, kind of get their back up a little bit. Well, this is the way I've always done it. And I disagree. I've seen what have you, how can they take what you're saying to heart without getting their panties in a bunch here, and just do better for their clients, because I'm sure, like everybody else, they've got clients they can put in various categories, as far as like those that respond well to training, like you just mentioned, those that just don't seem to get the same results. I don't think anybody would deny that. And can you speak to a little bit about how your book and the device or the tool that you put together could be helpful for someone that might have a fitness practice and how they can use that? And then we'll transition into maybe those that don't, and what aspects of this conversation could be of benefits to them.
Sure. Like some of these health coaches, remember, like the way everybody gets pulled into fitness is vanity. Like that's just a reality of it. So like those health coaches with female clients, they probably want to grow glute muscles, quad muscles. They want more defined calves, and any muscle you want to reshape. Now, women always call it reshaping. Men call it making it bigger. It's the same thing.
Right.
Which is just kind of irritating, but whatever. If women need to hear reshaping.
Tomato.
Okay. Just call it that. So, but I just wanted to clear, like, same thing. So like talking about reshaping the legs and someone's butt, like there's no getting away from heavy.
Right.
Like you need to go heavy. That's the only way a muscle is going to grow. And if you're going to do that, the problem is that's risk.
Right.
And a lot of times it's risk someone won't tolerate. Maybe if your client is a 19-year-old female, she's like, yeah, I'll go through some pain. But, maybe a 25-year-old female is like, no, I have a job. I can't like, screw up my back and then have to stay at home for 3 days. Like, I just can't do that. Or how about a mom chasing around a little kid? Like, if you're a mother, can you have a bad back day? Nah, you really can't. Even when you do, you still can't. You're still running around chasing your kid. You have no choice. So yeah, kids are kind of like little suicide machines. They're trying to figure out any way they can off themselves. And you have to constantly make sure that no, you can't put that fork in that, electric. So yeah, like I would approach it from that place, and with variable resistance. With X3, they're going to be able to stimulate a lot more growth without the risks of injury. And they're going to be able to continue to do that. My mother does it, and she's in her, God, she's going to be mad if she sees this. I think she's 86.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah, she still does it. It's funny. Yeah. She deadlifts. That's her best. Like her best thing is the deadlift. She deadlifts more than a lot of the guys.
Wow.
Yeah, who are in their 20s. Like she is really strong. She can carry she weighs 120 pounds. Maybe about 120 pounds, and she's 5'2", and she can carry a 50-pound bag of soil in each hand when she's in the garden. So she's walking out to the garden with 100 pounds of dirt.
Yeah.
In her mid 80s.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And like, she doesn't think a thing of it. She doesn't think she can do that because she's strong. She's like, oh, I just need the soil out there. And she just picks it up and carries it.
When did she start?
When did she start X3? When I had my prototype about 4 years ago.
Oh, so she was in her 80s when she started.
Oh yeah. Yeah. In her 80s. Oh. Yeah. She built this strength. Now she did OsteoStrong also.
Okay.
And you might've seen me on like Fox News with her.
So is OsteoStrong a program, and then X3 is equipment?
No, OsteoStrong is a medical device.
It is
it's a clinic.
Okay.
That has my proprietary medical devices in it.
Got it.
So they have the worldwide exclusive on that technology.
Are there any in Canada?
Not yet.
Might be the first, Aaron.
Where in Canada are you?
Oh, Calgary area.
Okay, I've heard of it.
rid of it. Okay. So for health coaches, and the reason I'm asking these questions is because my role at the school that Aaron and I work with is admissions director. So I'm talking to people all day long that have an interest in becoming a health coach, many of which have a fitness background. And they're like, clearly fitness alone is not the answer. I need to start talking about nutrition. I need to start talking about other things. So that's that subset. And I would argue, I 100% believe exactly what you believe, that from a fitness perspective, many fitness professionals need to be doing something better, something different. But I also have a whole other subset who's like, that's just not my bag. I don't feel as though I'm a fitness minded person. I really want to come to this from the standpoint of nutrition and mindset and what have you. And I try to explain to people that at the very least, movement is got to be a part of the story, because it filters. Humans were meant to move. So if you were talking to me and I'm someone who's a health coach and I'm intimidated about adding the idea of fitness to my coaching program or talking about it because I don't feel I know very much, can you tell me a little bit about what your book might provide, or what advice you might give someone like me to feel comfortable, like where I can maybe even just refer somebody to a fitness program? Because if I'm as a health coach, like believes what you believe, the fitness industry is kind of nonsense.
So I wrote the book. I mean, like it cites a lot of research, but it summarizes what it says in the studies in total layman's terms. So I wrote it so that like a person who knows nothing about fitness could get all the information they need to be successful. So I would say to somebody who's a health coach who isn't like a fitness person, they'd really enjoy the book. They'd also really enjoy the product, because the workout's 10 minutes. You cannot make it longer if you wanted to. You do it 4 to 6 days a week, depending on where you are in your development. But 10 minutes for a day is really not a big commitment.
Also,
people spend as much time brushing their teeth.
Also, it's like a perceived exertion thing. It's like, it doesn't really matter how, when we get into the gym and we have barbells, we're putting the plates on, we're doing the math. We're like, I guess this is the amount I'm supposed to be moving around this. But like with the variable resistance, it's like you put a band on and work it until you can't anymore. You're not going to run the risk of overdoing it or picking the wrong weight or something, right? It's pretty idiot proof in a way.
Yeah. Well, you'd be surprised what some people do. So apparently nothing's idiot proof. There's some people who use the product and they'll send me a video and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, don't ever do that again. They'll do it with like speed or something like that. It's like, there's different tools to train for speed if you want speed. Like if you're training for speed, X3 is not your thing. It will make you faster, but use it correctly. So we go very slow and controlled when you use X3. Like when I was emulating the repetition cadence, it's like this. The slower you go, the more stabilization firing you have, which means functionally you become faster. But that doesn't mean that that's the way you're training. So if you do want to harness that speed, you probably have to do some speed training with like plyometrics or, something else. Or just speed drills and things like that. But I mean, we're talking about something obscure that almost nobody's looking for. Like, I don't know any adults that are looking to like have a good 40-yard time.
Right. So for the health coach that is uninitiated into fitness, this is a pretty good entry point. Like it's a solid entry point because it's not time consuming. It's not complex. There's only a handful of moves, right? In the X3 program.
Right.
8 moves. And like how much sort of exercise physiology or biomechanics knowledge would a health coach need to have to maybe put somebody into this program?
None. In fact, we're going to have a certified trainer program coming online pretty soon.
That was going to be my next question. Is do you have a program for trainers?
Yeah. And so somebody like, you don't need to be a trainer of any other kind to be an X3 trainer. Actually, I think the people who are coming at it from a fresh perspective will probably be better because they haven't already convinced themselves of false truths that the fitness industry is full of.
Well,
so.
look, and if you think about this from a health coaching perspective, the number one, I'm going to use the term excuse, but in air quotes, many coaches get from their clients as to why they don't exercise is lack of time. Like number one excuse, right? So this is kind of BS. You can't find 10 minutes is when I'm going to call BS with my client and be like, then you're probably prioritizing something else. It's not that you don't have time. You're prioritizing.
I tell people like it's only 10 minutes. Like you'll find the time or you'll find an excuse. Either way, you're looking hard for one or the other.
Absolutely. I mean, I think every health coach, and look, our program, the thesis we live by is that the average American probably just needs to move more, right? We need just more movement throughout the day. We're advocates of what we would call lifting heavy things. That can mean a lot of things. And to your point, doesn't have to mean weights. And then every once in a while, you need like that sprint burst. We get into the adaptive hormone response to something like that. And again, that could take many different frames. But all in all, other than just moving more, which basically I could do right now, if my headset wasn't attached to my stinking laptop, I could be walking around right now and just moving more. Right. And so from the standpoint of the other aspect of this, none of those things, lifting heavy things or sprinting, does not have to take a long time. You do not have to be in the gym for 2 hours. You don't. That's a colossal waste of time. As much as, as a big of a meathead as I am, and I love to do those things, I don't spend 2 hours there. I try to build the most efficient workout I can. This one sounds like exceptionally efficient. Can you give us an example of what a typical 10-minute workout might be? And what that might look like maybe on a weekly basis.
So like my workout later, I'm going to do, I'm filming some things. So my workout later will not be the standard. So normally what I would do is like, let's say I start with chest press and one set, no warm up or anything. The first few repetitions are the warm up because it's very easy on joints. So things come online over the first 5 or 6 repetitions. And then you in fact, sometimes it starts off hard, like first 4 repetitions are a little difficult and then it gets easier because you're potentiating, you're switching on more muscle. And so it's taking on, it's dividing the load between all the cells. And then you do the chest press. And so we go higher repetitions because we're dealing with staggeringly high weight. Like I told you, my chest press is like 500 plus pounds. So I'm not going to do more than one set of that. That is devastating. And like Aaron squats, just devastating, exhausting. And then so I'll do triceps, overhead press, and then squats. So like that's the push day. So 4 movements. Also supplementary movement. I do a crossover also where I don't use the bar, just take the band and kind of squeeze because with the pectorals are kind of a funny muscle group. They're a little different than anything. You want to get the most weight through them because that activates the most testosterone receptors. So that's weight dependent. Like I said, there's no escaping heavy. But the pectoral, when you're here, is not fully contracted. It's fully contracted when you're here.
Yeah, when you're crossed over.
Right. That's why we add in the crossover. So you can fatigue it in 2 ways. So we have to fatigue it in 2 ways. So that's the whole workout. And it takes about 10 minutes. And then I'm done.
You said there was 8 moves. So we have a chest press, overhead press.
The crossover is kind of supplementary for people who want size in their chest. Like, so women typically don't do the crossover, but they'll do the rest of the movements.
Okay.
And so what would your next workout then be? Are they pull movements?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like deadlift, bent over row, bicep curl, and then we do a calf raise. I know that's kind of a pushing movement, but it gives you 4 and 4.
Cool.
Yeah. And so are you typically just alternating those 2 types of sets?
That's right. Yeah. So one day is one and the other day is the other. So we give 48 hours rest. We know from muscle biopsy studies, it takes 36 hours to complete protein synthesis. So we hit every muscle group 3 times in a week. You ensure the most amount of growth and never overtraining.
Gosh, this just sounds so good. Every time I hear it, I'm like, yeah, I got to get one of these things because it's 10 minutes every 3 days. I'm like, come on.
I will sell all my other gym equipment so that I could go buy that and make up room.
Yeah.
Now, some people do it like Aaron, so I do it 6 days a week.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so I
Oh,
split
right.
the body, and that's why I hit each muscle 3 times.
Got you. Yeah.
So, but some people do it 4 times a week, so they hit every muscle twice.
Mm-hmm.
Or some people do all the movements in one day. So it's like, maybe like when you do that, you got to need a little more rest. So it might be a 25-minute workout, but you only have to do it 3 times a week. So, Monday, Wednesday, Friday kind of thing.
That's wild. And if you did this, you would put on 3 times the muscle and just that.
So many people argue with me about that point, even though it does say that in the research. It actually says 3 times the strength. Now, of course, you only get stronger by growing a muscle. Nobody ever got stronger by shrinking the muscle.
True.
So yeah, there was some bozo who was just rattling my cage on his Instagram, his YouTube channel.
So could you, I would love for you to kind of make the pitch and make the argument to, and again, I'm sorry guys, because I'll ask a guy related question next. I'll think of one. But to your point, so many women that are like, I don't want to get bulky. You can get stronger without looking like a she-man. Okay.
Looking masculine, the women that end up looking masculine from lifting, they're taking male hormones to look like that.
Right.
And it's unfortunate. They shouldn't do that. You can be strong and feminine. Like there's two things that are not counter each other. And it's funny because almost any time that a woman who does a lot of strength training is seen in public, like my fiance, for example, super strong. And people ask me, they'll be like a group of girls will ask me when I go to like the restroom, they'll be like, that girl you're with, like her body is incredible.
Right.
Like, what's her workout like? And I'm like, no, I don't want to get into X3. I'm like, strength training only, no cardio. And they're like, what? And I'm thinking, I've got to be like the 100th person that said this to you. Because anybody that does an all cardio workout, they look like a melted ice cream cone. They're skinny fat. They look awful. Sorry. No, I mean, hey, if somebody wants to be a marathon runner, and that's what makes them happy.
Right.
That's great. It's certainly a better habit than heroin. So good for you. But it doesn't mean like it's not going to create the aesthetic you want, I promise.
All you have to do is, just taking a look back to your point where you're talking about the Olympics, the difference between the female long distance marathon runners and the female sprinters. I don't know about you, but those female sprinters, I was like, damn, girl, you
perfect
look good.
Body. Yeah. And they look young, like forever. Like sprinters look like they're in their like mid-20s when they're like 50.
Yeah. And how many of them do you think are training by running 10 miles? Like they're not training that way. No doubt they're sprinting. I'm not going to pretend to know how but I know that they strength train because I've met them before, So
a sprinter want to make their arm heavier. Right. And the reason why is when you throw your arm back, you want a lot of mass here. When you throw your arm back, because that helps the locomotion. It pivots your pelvis slightly and gets you a longer stride with the next foot on the opposite foot. Yeah. So you want a very balanced muscular body when you're sprinting.
Yeah.
Like you never see a sprinter with skinny arms.
No. This question though of women who want to get strong but not bulky, there's a funny meme that went around that was worrying about getting too bulky by lifting weights is like worrying about accidentally becoming an F1 driver just because not driving because you don't want to accidentally become an F1 driver or something like that. So
right.
Like
perfect.
It's not going to happen. You're going to have to work at it.
Right. It's not like you run 3 stoplights and somebody pulls you over and they're like, we need you to drive for Mercedes next year.
Right. Yeah.
And you have no choice.
It takes a lot of effort to get super, super bulky and strong like that, or some kind of enhancement.
It takes, and then some women will say, like, every time I lift, I get big. And I'm like, no. Every time you lift, you stimulated your appetite. And instead of eating responsibly, you ate cupcakes.
Yes.
And so bigger was not muscle, you just got fatter.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so, a lot of them were like, wow, like that's a big accusation. And I'm like, I'm right. And they're like, maybe.
Yeah,
It
that's a
is
mental
true.
game. It's like I made a hole. I had this hard workout. First of all, there's a mental game like, oh, I made a workout or I made a hole. I earned and burned
Yes.
calories,
Mhm.
and the ravenous hunger that's inherent when you start ramping up a strength program. Those two things combined totally play havoc with folks and their nutrition. And they're not even realizing it because we've been culturally conditioned to, oh man, I gains, right? Gotta fill the hole that I just made.
Yep.
And the other one learn why. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, like people have trouble understanding why I work out fasted.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
how do
yeah.
you gain muscle? It's like you grow in your sleep.
Mm.
Like nobody ever, there's studies where people have like 5 meals and people have 2 meals and they have the same exact nutrients. Makes no difference whatsoever.
Right.
Meal time,
So
nothing.
I love that. So there's a gym in my community that, put out these nutritional like myth busting things.
Yeah.
Uh, half of them I agreed with, half I disagreed with, but whatever. Who am I? I'm just a health coach. But one of the things, the myth buster that they recommended against was fasted workouts and why that's bad. Which she didn't go into any detail,
Okay.
by the way.
Yeah,
She
that's a
just was
workout.
just sort of how your body needs fuel to move kind of thing.
You want your blood to be going to muscle. You don't want it to be going to your intestines.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Like fasted workouts are like, they were one of those things that to me was obvious.
Mm-hmm.
So
Are you a proponent then of, because I got this question from a client the other day. I got a question from a new client I took on. I randomly ended up with a lot of triathletes in my client roster. It's a long story, but so I'm having to unwind a lot of conventional wisdom around training and nutrition with these folks. And so one of my clients is pushing back hard on the anabolic window.
yeah, no such
She's
thing.
like, okay, good. I was like, we're having you eat a ton of protein all day long. Like you're good. You don't have to time it within 30 minutes or whatever of your strength session. You're getting as long as you're getting ample protein, you're good. So are you a proponent of that line of thinking?
Yeah. Like
Good.
you grow at night.
Mhm.
Like you grow when you sleep. Like now your body has no mechanism to store protein, but it can stay digesting for a long time.
Mhm.
Also, there is muscle protein synthesis that goes on during the day. So I shouldn't say you do all of your growth at night. You do most of it at night.
Right.
But and there was just a very odd study that came out. Don't really know what to make of it, but it showed that people that consume more protein in the morning grew a little bit more muscle.
Yeah.
Than the people who consume it at night. I still consume mine at night just because, like, I don't have big breakfast meetings. I do have big dinner meetings though.
Yeah. That tracks for me though, like from a circadian biology perspective, a little bit,
Right.
like this whole idea that we're more insulin sensitive in the morning and, in a manner of speaking, the body's ready to take up and put fuel to work because the sun rose. Like, I don't know, I geek out on that stuff. So that makes sense to me.
See, I try and be depleted all day. Now, another thing I do is, and I've been running this experiment for a little over 6 months. I dry fast every day. So sort of like Ramadan fasting. And the only reason I mention Ramadan fasting is there are literally more than 1 billion people who do this per year, every year for the last 800 years. And there hasn't been any health complications. So it's a great point of reference. Like, now, and there are Muslim athletes who do this as well. Their performance does not suffer. So do you constantly need to be drinking water? Well, apparently not, because I go 20 hours a day drinking no fluids at all. But here's the weird thing. When I go into my hydration window, which I consume my food in also, I still drink about the same amount of liquid that a normal person does.
Right.
Like 2 liters minimum, sometimes 3. So I'm thirsty and I drink. And so it's like I'm getting it all at once and then, flushing it all out for the next day so I can take advantage of the dry fast. You guys know, I bet your listeners don't know why people would dry fast.
I literally haven't heard of it. And I'm so curious because
it's awesome. Now, I mean, people started noticing this via Ramadan fasting. So it did not have like a performance origin. But what they realized was you actually can't get so dehydrated normally that you'll like hurt yourself, because it's what happens is you get dehydrated, your mouth gets dry, you feel like you can't sweat, and then all of a sudden it all comes back.
Mhm.
And then, sort of like regular fasting, like you're hungry, and then all of a sudden you're not hungry.
Mhm.
So what happens is your body switches to tapping into metabolic water, which is the water in the only non-vascular tissue we have, which is fat. So it starts pulling water out of fat cells, which if you pull enough water out of fat cells, it destroys them permanently. So you get very lean by doing this. And I'm like, now that I've done dry fasting, I'll never do water fasting again. Dry fasting is
Interesting.
absolutely awesome. So I go 20 hours a day, no liquids. And then I get into my hydration window, do my workout, then eat. And then usually I'm just up for another couple hours and go to bed.
So how would you,
Right.
go ahead, Erin.
Do you do electrolytes when you drink your water, or are you just getting all your
I
minerals
used to. Great question. So I used to, but I'm so used to it now, I don't need them.
Mhm.
Like, I'm not actually dehydrated. My body knows how to manage it.
Mm-hmm.
So our little school and the people that sort of are part of our little ancestral health community, nobody finds the idea of fasting alien or all that controversial at all. I'm sure other people listening that aren't part of our little ancestral world might, but those that graduated from our school or identify or kind of sort of buy into the whole ancestral model, fasting is a very normal part of the human experience.
Yeah.
But dry fasting, probably not as much. So if somebody wanted to actually try that, do you recommend they jump into a 20-hour dry fast? Baby step your way into something like that? Like, what
Definitely
would your
baby steps first.
Yeah. So how would you sort of recommend somebody give that a try?
I mean, first, the first step is just skipping breakfast. Just most people eat 3 meals a day. Just skip breakfast. Just start skipping breakfast for a week. Don't eat breakfast for a week.
And
Just
all
have 2 meals.
fluids as well?
Oh yeah, drink
Everything.
fluids. Yeah. So that's step one. Now, that's not going to give you great results, like the short fasted periods. Like it's more than a caloric deficit is happening when you're in a fasted period, because there's some hormonal implications. How important those are, like you have scientists like Lane Norton who just completely denies that any hormonal change makes any difference whatsoever, and it's only about calories. That's been ascribed for the last 70 years, and Americans are fatter and sicker than ever. So I do think it's a little more complicated than just calorie restriction. Also, calorie restriction is very unrealistic for people who eat addictive foods. So if you eat carbohydrates, you want to eat all the time. And he denies that. I like that guy. I mean, like, I know he's like a professional troll. All